How do you get to know someone? Do you rely on what's on the internet or what other people say about them? Or do you get to know them by meeting them in person, talking, listening to their stories, and learning? The Palestinian people have been talked about a lot in the news lately.
Rockets were once again launched at Israel. 4 young Palestinian boys killed right near here. The military said it was targeting Hamas terrorist operatives and called the boys.
What is going on in Gaza right now, where youth unemployment is 70 or 80%, is unsustainable.
It's a big opportunity for the Palestinians, and they have a perfect track record of blowing every opportunity they've had in their past, but
Yet how we got to know them wasn't by what we found online. It was through their stories they told for themselves. During our trip to the Holy Land, the first spot Riya, Jackie, and I traveled to was the city of Jerusalem. The city is reverent to 3 major religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and many of the holy sites are located within and around the city. This area is also one of the most contested sites for the Israelis and Palestinians. Both claim it to be theirs. The city is divided between East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem, with the Israelis controlling the western half and the Palestinians located on the eastern side. Look familiar? The Western Wall, the holiest site in Judaism, is in such close proximity to the Dome of the Rock, the 3rd holiest site in Islam. It is where the west side meets the east. The partition of the city took place after the creation of Israel in 1948, during the Arab-Israeli War, which Palestine and the other Arab states of Syria, Egypt, Transjordan, and Iraq joined together and fought against Israel. Israel won the war, and in the process, it went past its original borders assigned by the United Nations. This map shows the original land of Palestine before the creation of Israel, then the borders assigned by the United Nations, and finally the land gains that the Israeli military took during the Arab-Israeli War. This included taking control of Western Jerusalem, which was supposed to remain an international site. In the process of doing this, the Israeli military managed to push thousands of Palestinians out of their homes and communities, forcing them to become refugees in Gaza, Lebanon, and Jordan. Palestinians call this the Nakba.
Nakba is a word in Arabic means catastrophe, which is the term that used in order to describe the history of 1948, of course, for the Palestinian people.
The separation between the West Bank and Israel is visibly seen through the wall constructed by the Israeli government after the Second Intifada. Some say it looks strikingly similar to other walls. Yet what many do not understand is that this was not a fair partition. Several Palestinians were uprooted from their villages during the Nakba in areas currently located in Israel.
The state of Israel destroyed 90% of the Palestinian towns and neighborhoods and villages, the huge number of the refugees of about 750,000 Palestinians who were forced to leave their homeland were not allowed to come back. Their property was taken by the state according to Israeli law.
Our tour guide showed us the small Palestinian village of Lifta, which was one of the areas that sits on the western side of Jerusalem, where the military expelled a whole town. It sits like a ghost town today, surrounded by Israeli communities. Israelis come down to bathe in the town's natural springs, play with their children, or just sit on the crumbling structures. They seem oblivious to the pain and suffering that occurred here. There's graffiti all over the buildings. This message was written in Hebrew and translates to "Death to Arabs." We walked onto the abandoned mosque, where people would gather and pray. Houses on the outskirts of the abandoned village have been torn down to make room for new apartments. The remnants of this village are slowly being erased from the map. This is only one example of the numerous villages and towns that were abandoned during the Nakba. Many of them have been torn down or inhabited by Israeli families, making the right of return for Palestinians a more difficult task. Yet Palestinians still demand that peace will only come when the right to return is agreed upon between Israelis and Palestinians.
Justice will not be achieved without allowing or implementing the right to return of the Palestinian refugees. I believe that Palestinians will return and want to return, and they should return.
The next area we visited was the city of Hebron. Like many areas in the West Bank, there is an Israeli presence within the city. The Hebron Protocol, signed in January 1997, divided the West Bank city into two areas. Control of Area H1 shifted to the Palestinian Authority, and H2 remained under Israeli military control. With the creation of H2, Israel strategically gained control of the area in which the old city lies, otherwise known as the economic hub of Hebron. As a direct result of the Hebron Protocol, the original Palestinian population of H2 decreased drastically due to restrictions on movement, extended curfews, and the closure of shops and businesses imposed only on the Palestinian residents from the strict Israeli military rule. We spent time in the H1 area, which is supposed to be under Palestinian Authority. However, after walking through several checkpoints armed with Israeli guards whose job it is to restrict and regulate the movements of Palestinians, one can quickly notice the restrictions the Israeli occupation places on H1 as well. We learned from our tour guide that many Palestinians will be targeted and harassed at multiple checkpoints.
So the person will be checked on first checkpoint where they target him. They keep him for some minutes, they release him, then they call their colleagues on the checkpoint that is 10 meters or like tens of meters after. Raed or Ahmad is on his way to you. You keep him again. You know, you imagine this like a process going in and out.
Upon arrival to a checkpoint, we were warned by an Israeli soldier to stop our filming.
He noticed that George and I are speaking in Arabic, so he approached us and asked where we are from. And as he knew that we are Palestinians, so he said, you know that you cannot proceed the area. I said, okay, but we can go to the coming area.
Israel has started a silent ethnic cleansing of H1 by not allowing Palestinians to walk or drive on certain streets so that people can't get to their houses and are therefore forced to move. It is common for Israeli settlers to illegally break in and take control of Palestinian homes. In many of these cases, when Palestinians present the situation to the Israeli court, the court admits that these actions are illegal, but rules that it will maintain the status quo, therefore allowing the Israeli settlers to maintain ownership of these stolen homes. Many Palestinians live in fear in H1 because they know that they can be subject to brutality by the Israeli Defense Force. Palestinian homes have metal barriers outside their windows because Israeli settlers throw stones at them, and the Israeli government has changed the name of streets and neighborhoods from Arabic to Hebrew to give the area a Jewish identity. As our visit was coming to an end, a young boy ran up to our tour guide and begged him to tell us his story. We learned that the Israeli military will often put up gates and blockades in random areas, restricting anyone from going in or leaving. One day, at the age of 12 years old, this boy found himself locked in an area and knew that the only way he could make it to school was if he jumped over a block. Due to his decision, the Israeli military deployed 100 soldiers to chase him, destroying many Palestinian buildings and shops on the way as they searched for him. Eventually, the soldiers showed up to the school and evacuated all students at gunpoint until they found the boy, and then
they beat him up, and then they released him with his eyes full. By that time, he was less than 13, he was 12 something. Just for jumping, did not hurt anyone, just for jumping and trying to school.
What we saw and the stories that were told to us at Hebron rattled us to our core. It showed us what the occupation looked like at its very heart. It showed us that the presence of Israeli settlements within the West Bank makes it unbearable for Palestinians to live there. The strategies that the Israeli military has deployed have not been under the consideration of a two-state solution, and from what we saw, it is apparent that the Israeli government wants life for the Palestinians to be so miserable that they have no choice but to leave.
When the Nakba took place and Israel gained land, some Palestinians stayed in their communities, despite being within Israeli borders. This is true for the Bedouins in the Negev Desert, who are Arab nomadic people that have been living in this harsh environment through Ottoman rule, British rule, and now Israeli rule. While they are considered Israeli citizens, many Bedouin communities are unrecognized by Israel, and therefore do not receive government benefits or have equal rights with Israeli Jews. This can easily be seen by the lack of infrastructure the community we visited had. Many of the houses were tin shacks, and the only electricity they had was by solar panels they installed on their roofs. Ironically, there is an electricity plant placed right next to the community, but the electricity lines do not provide power to the village, despite the fact that the lines travel directly over the town. Unlike the clean, greener energy that the Bedouins use to power their homes, the power plant nearby emits dangerous toxins into the air, poisoning the area and making many of the Bedouins sick with cancer and other illnesses. This is a textbook example of a sacrifice zone in the realm of environmental justice. The power plant is purposefully located next to a population that is denied certain rights and without any political standing to defend themselves in challenging these large power plant companies. This is a reality for many black and brown communities within the United States, and it is a reality for these Palestinians in Israel. Another thing that the Israeli government has taken away from the Bedouin people is their freedom of movement. Considering that they live in the Negev Desert and experience harsh conditions, they were reliant on being able to move to different regions during a shift in the seasons. Ever since Israel was established, they have been forced to remain where they are. This affects their entire way of life, and also forces them to deal with resource scarcity when the weather and seasons are not in their favor. Being trapped on a measurement of land chokes the way of life for many Bedouin people, and with no aid from the Israeli government, this community suffers the harsh effects of the Israeli occupation, despite being Israeli citizens themselves.
Nabi Saleh is a small village located in the central portion of the West Bank. It has a population of about 600 Palestinians, all from the Tamimi family. Nabi Saleh has a long history of resistance and has had weekly marches and protests of the occupation since 2009. The Palestinians in Nabi Saleh engage in nonviolent protests. However, the Israeli Defense Force counters these protests with excessive force using guns, tear gas, rubber bullets, and skunk water. In more recent years, the IDF has targeted Palestinian homes with skunk water, contaminating their water supply on their roofs. Palestinians are only allotted 12 hours of water a week, making the rainwater they collect on their roofs essential to their survival. During our time in the village, a man showed us a video that he created demonstrating the excessive force the IDF soldiers used against the Palestinian villagers and exposed the harsh reality of the situation. In the video, the villagers counted 1,500 tear gas canisters thrown at the people on a single Friday. 1,500 canisters of tear gas thrown at a village which has a population of only 600 people. Palestinians were shown in the video sitting down and getting pepper sprayed. Nabi Saleh is declared a military zone by the Israeli government, meaning IDF soldiers can break into any house and take any person they choose. This creates an environment where the villagers living in Nabi Saleh can't even feel safe in their own homes and must live in constant fear. Many villagers reported waking up in the middle of the night to the burning of tear gas in their homes, or IDF soldiers abruptly waking them, searching for the child that threw that rock or an adult responsible for the resistance movement. The children play a remarkable role in all resistance movements, but especially this one. A story that touched me deeply was when the speakers talked about their son's experience with being arrested and what he went through during his 25 days in interrogation. During those 25 days, he was sent to receive medical care twice because of injuries he sustained at the hands of the Israeli government. Their son was so mentally, emotionally, and psychologically abused that when he was finally reunited with his mother, he didn't recognize her. While his mother was standing next to him, he said, "If you see my mother, tell her I love her." One thing they tell their children often is, "At one point you were going to die, but you were fighting for humanity." The villagers wanted to emphasize the importance of understanding what their conflict is about at its core. They are not fighting a religious fight, but they are fighting the Zionist mentality and all the horrible things that mentality has done to the Palestinian people. They also wanted to ensure that we understood that the success of the occupation and the ability for the Israeli government to continue to oppress the Palestinians is because of a lack of international backlash. The U.S. support of Israel has allowed for basic human rights to be stripped from the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people need our help. Sharing their stories is crucial to the movement, as we have the power to change the minds and hearts of the people around us. International backlash can only be achieved if the reality of the situation is exposed. The villagers in Nabi Saleh are fighting their fight and will continue their resistance, but we must now be called upon to fight ours through educating the international community at large and shifting international support away from Israel and towards aiding the Palestinian people.
When people see the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, they view it as a sophisticated and complex issue and often struggle with how to align their beliefs.
While this conflict is a construct of many moving parts, we realize that finding truths on the basis of human rights was the most clear path forward.
From the stories we heard to the things we witnessed firsthand, it is clear that the human rights of Palestinians are being violated under the occupation of the Israeli state. Palestinian lands have been taken. The Israeli military uses repressive means to control the West Bank and the Gaza Strip to make an apartheid state, and has denied giving Palestinians a sovereign nation due to Israeli settlements which have been deemed illegal under international law.
The Palestinians are like any mother, father, and child I would see back in the United States, who just want a peaceful future for their families, but cannot be given that on the land that they should be able to consider home.
As our trip came to an end, we spent some time in the city of Ramallah, the capital of the West Bank. There, we visited a giant statue of Nelson Mandela, an anti-apartheid revolutionist and the first Black president of South Africa. Palestinians see Mandela as a symbol of overcoming oppressive forces and reaching true equality. Mandela is often quoted saying, "We know all too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians."
The oppression of the Israeli state is not tied to Judaism, but with the Zionist mentality and how that ideology has a detrimental impact on the Palestinian people. As a Jewish American, I think understanding this distinction is vital, as it contradicts the idea that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic and encourages people to look at and understand the occupation differently. I am confident that there will be a solution, but not until the United States shifts their perspective on this conflict and addresses the human rights violations against the Palestinian people. The places and stories we documented just scratch the surface of the impact the occupation has had and will continue to have on the Palestinian people. Although we saw a lot of dark things on our trip, it is undeniable that the people of Palestine have a will and drive for a better future. They hope to see a day when the rolling hills of the Holy Land are lowered with the raised valleys, and they can experience the equality and freedom they so desperately deserve.
I hear Jerusalem bells are ringing, Roman cavalry choirs are singing. Be my mirror, my sword and shield, my missionaries on a foot.